So I'd like to start our meeting tonight by calling the Mahtomedi Public School Board meeting to order. It is Thursday, January 25th, 2020. We are holding, due to the declared health pandemic and declared state of emergency, the school board meeting is being held by conference call or interactive technology in accordance with Minnesota State Statute 13D-021. This meeting is being live streamed and will be posted on the district website tomorrow. So if I could have a roll call of attendance, please.
Mike Chevalier.
Here.
Kevin Donovan.
Here.
Julie McGraw here. Stacy Stout.
Here.
I see you. Judy Schwartz.
Here.
And Lucy Payne.
Chair is here. Thank you, Julie. So the first thing we need is an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Mike Chevalier, second by Stacy Stout. Any discussion on the agenda? Any discussion? All those in favor, roll call vote.
Okay, Mike Chevalier.
Aye.
Kevin Donovan.
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz.
Aye.
Stacy Stout.
Aye.
And Lucy Payne.
The chair's aye. Motion carries. Thank you so much. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Thank
Kevin.
you. Thank you Thank you, Julie. Moved by Julie McGraw, second by Kevin Donovan. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Any discussion on the consent agenda? Kevin, did you want to address the consent agenda tonight?
In what way am I addressing the consent agenda? I hadn't planned on it. I was planning on.
You have a comment for later, though, and you've got a place to put your comments.
Yep.
Okay. I misunderstood. I'm sorry. So any discussion on the consent agenda? All right. If we could do a roll call vote for approval of the consent agenda.
Okay, Mike Chevalier.
Aye.
Kevin Donovan.
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz.
Aye.
Stacy Stout.
Aye.
And Lucy Payne.
Chair's aye. Motion carries. The next usual items on our agenda are presentations and recognitions and report from the student representatives, and we don't have business under those two items this evening. So we will jump into the discussion and information items, which the first one is the board member calendar. So the calendar was included in the packet. Are there anything that board members would like to call their attention to? It's a very quiet summer. It's a very short page to cover July and August. So we do have some meetings coming up. I see some of them outside of us to prepare for next year. I do see the MSBA summer seminar on this chart. There is a great possibility that structure will change. It has not been announced yet. I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but there's a good possibility that won't happen in that time block, that they're looking at some other ways because of the virtual nature that will take, that it might be better to do it over a couple different days or something like that. So please be watching your email from MSBA because that might look different. But that has not been announced yet, but I know they're investigating that. So just watch for that. Anything else? All right. Next on the agenda, oops, I'm sorry, I just lost my agenda. Come on back. Sorry, there we go. Next on the agenda is the superintendent end of the year evaluation summary. So at our last study session earlier in the month, we met as a board in closed session according to Minnesota statute to review our superintendent for end of the year. In that review, there is a written document that will be forwarded to our superintendent, Barb Dufferin, and I've sent that to the board members to review and take a look at before I pass that on to her. So if you have comments, please email me those comments. But I would like to summarize for the public our conversation. So our conversation was very, very positive. It was a very difficult year, and Barb is a second-year superintendent, and she performed very, very well with all the stress and all the changes and things that were happening, and the board is very pleased with her performance. In the survey that we do prior to us discussing, there were some comments I want to share with the public in terms of how board members are feeling about her work. And they are right here. These are quotes from the board members. Barb is a strong leader and collaborator. While there are areas for growth, she's always embraces such situations as an opportunity. Barb has really shown strong and focused leaderships in ISD 832. As a board member, I feel our district is in good hands. Barb is an exceptional leader who has shown this time and time again. Her response and work with COVID-19 has been exceptional. Thank you, Barb, for your hard work and commitment. And finally, I have confidence in her leadership and the decisions that she makes. And so you can tell that these comments have come from many board members. We were very unanimous in our support and evaluation of Barb as being a very high quality superintendent for our district and really helping us move forward. So Barb, thank you for your work this past year, 2 years that you've been with us.
Thank you. And I have to say, that of course, I'm thankful for the recognition, and I appreciate the nice words, but of course, I have a very strong team that I work with, and so many of the things that you see coming from the district is a result of our team, which I consider exceptional. So thank you, and thank you for your support as well. I do appreciate it.
All right, next on the agenda, we have our COVID-19 update. This is a regular agenda item dealing with our current pandemic situation. So Barb, I'll turn this over to you.
Yes, thank you. So we did complete our end of the year survey of families, which is standard. And but within that, we also had some questions about experiences with distance learning. So we, as an administrative team, we have looked through those comments, and we use those alongside our most recent guidance from the Department of Health and the Department of Education, which we received last week. And we are sending out another survey. It will go out either tomorrow or Monday to families to get more input on the 3 different scenarios. So I've talked about this a number of times, that we knew this part was coming, the 3 different scenarios of being this fall being face-to-face in-person learning, or potentially a hybrid, which is part face or in-person and part distance learning, or being fully in distance learning. I keep stumbling on in-person and face-to-face because I need to stop using face-to-face, because if we are in a distance learning situation, we are very clear from families that some component of that distance learning needs to be in a face-to-face, a synchronous classroom situation. That is very clear to us. So I'm going to say in-person instead of face-to-face for that reason, but I have to practice. So those are our 3 scenarios, and we have that. We've done our best to really outline that so it's clear to families what that means, each of those 3. And then we have some follow-up questions, one based on our public health guidance, and then there are some other questions that principals had as a result of reading their surveys from parents. They need further clarification on some items, and so families will be getting that survey so that we will use that information to continue our planning. The idea is that we will continue to just go through the guidance and work through the different options and the ways that we can make that work, so that we are ready when the state tells us what format we'll be in. We'll have a version which will be our best thinking at that moment, but we'll still have opportunity to change some of those things before the fall within that guidance. I'd want to be clear that once we hear from MDE what our format is, we may be more restrictive, but not less restrictive in the way that we execute the plan. I also want to say that if we are in an in-person environment, we do know that there are families, students and staff who will not be able to participate in an in-person environment. And so we will have a distance learning opportunity for those students and staff as well. So we are planning for that as well. And you'll see all of that when you get your family survey shortly. And it's important to us that we get as much feedback as possible for our planning. We will be reaching out to families who might not typically be watching their email or communicating electronically typically, and we'll be reaching out to find out more from those families as well. And we will be working with teachers and staff to make those plans. So I know that's not necessarily I know you might be looking for something more concrete. We don't have that yet, but we are going to be looking for some more information from all of you very soon.
So Barb, could you clarify for the public, especially what the current situation is? Because MDE did release a very lengthy document this past week or end of last week that is some information, but that's not what we're waiting for. We're waiting for a second document. Can you talk about those two pieces and the timeline there?
Well, it's not necessarily a second document that we're waiting for. We've been told that we need to come up with the 3 different scenarios. So it's a 100-page document that MDE gave us, 16 pages from the Department of Health. And so it's our task to prepare what will it look like in our district if we are in person, and go through all the public health documents to make sure that we have protocols in place related to that scenario. And then also, what does our schedule look like? How are our classes going to run? How does instruction look different in each of those? We've identified as some pretty core areas for us is how do we maintain relationships and connections with students and staff? How do we continue or improve in a distance learning environment? How do we continue our rigorous instruction that's also equitable by design for students? And then how is it that we're going to be flexible? How are we going to ensure access and engagement for our students in an equitable fashion? So those are our big areas, and we have to take those and go through each of our scenarios, create plans, and then what will happen is at the end of July, we'll hear from the Department of Education and they will say, here's the scenario that you are going to use. And then we will have a scenario drafted, a plan drafted so that we can then start moving forward with that.
So in a sense, we've been asked as a district, as every district in the state has been, to take our usual amount of time, our usual amount of resources and triple plan.
Yes, I guess that would be it. Yes.
Okay. And then eventually we'll be told which of these plans we get to enact with what limitations. So
yes, and I guess one thing I would suggest is that, we are all hopeful that we would be we'll be in person in the fall. And there's that strong possibility that we could start that way and then need to switch to hybrid, for example. And because of the work we will have done, we will be more able to switch back and forth. And I think that's the intent too. So, however, those could look so very different. Be a hybrid, which is part in person and part distance learning, is going to require that we be at 50% capacity within our buildings, which requires a very different schedule, a very different way of doing business than an in-person. So it will be challenging to do the hybrid version, certainly.
So in thinking of timelines though, and I'm sorry to overtake this conversation, the other board members I'm sure have questions also, but in terms of timelines, we know Julie sent me a piece, the state of Wisconsin just announced what they're doing next year. I know some of our local private schools have announced what they're doing next year. We can't announce anything of what we're doing until this magical date that MD has set of after July 27th. So
right.
We're anxious. We would love to know what to expect next year, but we don't have the ability to make that final decision until after we have some more information from MDE in late July.
Right. Although I will say our survey does try to lay out some concrete parts to what it would look like without actually being able to say, we will be in person. It
Right.
can at least say, if we are in person, here's what we've got. So we do have some concreteness to it.
Okay.
right. But we can't decide yet.
Okay, so I sort of overtook that segment. I apologize to my fellow board members. Do other board members have questions? So Stacy, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
So do I understand correctly then there is a plan being developed currently and it'll be ready by the end of July?
That's the idea. As ready as we think. So we're going to be ready, and we think we're going to have a great plan at the end of July. And it's very possible that there will be some tweaks to it between the end of July and by the time we roll out. But we're going to be as prepared as possible to be able to say when we are told what we can do, we will be able to say, this is the plan. So we need some parent input. We will need teacher input. We'll have teachers working with us as well on a lot of the details. And we'll be coming back to some parent groups as well. So,
Okay, I have another follow-up. So given that the end of July allows very little turnaround time before the beginning of school, I saw a news report where St. Paul has already put in hand sanitizer dispensers. They've created a separate area, nurse's office with for students with symptoms or teachers with symptoms. Will we have all that stuff moving already? Because we don't know which scenario will be picked.
yes, we're doing that regardless. So we are planning for, thanks for asking that question. We are planning as though everyone will be there. And then what do we need in terms of, hand sanitizer, plexiglass partitions. Yeah, so we're certainly planning for that.
And is it already being ordered and purchased? Okay.
I can't say purchased. I know we are, yes, we will be ready with that. Yes, how about that?
I have other questions, but I will let others go first and then I'll.
Kevin, why don't you go ahead and then I'll come back to Stacy. Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. So you mentioned this, and I just wanted to make sure I was firm and understanding. But when we have done the student family surveys on how it went for them this spring, have we made sure that our outreach staff have engaged with some of our communities of color in our district so that we have a good understanding of where they are with the distance learning? I do know that we do have, as small school districts do, a persistent gap. And I just want to make sure during this time that we don't have that gap widen. Just want to make sure we're intentional. And I think you said that, but I want to just make sure we're intentional on the ability to reach out again to some of our community members that maybe have recent immigrants to Minnesota and to this country, and make sure that the distance learning is working for them as best it can.
I know our EL, so in terms of our, for students, okay, so we have students who have English language needs and families, and I do know our EL teachers were active throughout in working with our students and families and figuring out what they would need. If I would have to turn you back to the principals to get more specific than that in terms of if you're looking for specifics. And we also have been our outreach staff was very active during distance learning in advocating for our students and families and knowing what it was that they needed. That said, we know we need to continue that through the summer in continuing to reach out to our students and families and continue to figure out what's needed. As part of that, one of the things we did do is make sure that students and families who needed devices during the summer were able to keep them so that they could continue to communicate, keep track of what was going on, have easier ways to reach out to us as well through that. So there are some things that we've done, but we're going to continue throughout the summer to make sure we're continuing to reach out to families.
Thank you.
Other questions on COVID-19? Go ahead, Julie.
So will the bus company come up with their own ideas on taking care of the buses? I mean, I know we've identified that as one of the hardest areas to reimagine. Is it kind of their responsibility? I mean, clearly we're working with them, but is it theirs to fix the buses in a way that could make it work?
Jeff, do you want to jump in and talk about your conversations with transportation?
There, am I unmuted?
You're good.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so we've been working with the bus company. You know, they're going to have to follow the protocols from the Department of Health. We're just starting to talk about if we were to follow a 6-foot distance requirement on a 77 passenger bus, we can get 13 students on a bus. So we have to obviously do some different things. We think that there's probably ways to get up to, I think they're talking about maybe up to 23 students on a bus and be safe. So it's going to have a lot to do with how we load the bus. We can have family members sitting together, so we're looking at that. We'll have them, I mean, again, they've got their protocols to follow. They're going to be charged with kind of whatever scenario we go with. They'll be charged with doing the routing to make it work. So, but certainly it's a kind of a capacity. It's a capacity issue. So I think a lot of districts are struggling with the transportation piece.
Stacy, go ahead. Oh, I'm
Just to follow up on that, do we have any idea of what the costs could be if the bus has to do 3 routes rather than 2 in a day because it's a hybrid model?
We're looking at that, but I can tell you maybe I think it's probably Centennial School District might be a little bit ahead of kind of everybody in that regard. And so if they had I think it's about a 2.8 million, it's a little bigger, but than our operation, but $2.8 million kind of regular transportation cost. They're doing like a third kind of tier, whole extra route was about $1 million. So obviously we're going to try to make this work under how we kind of currently operate, but we're not going to go out and we wouldn't be able to go out and buy additional buses. So it's going to be a kind of a scheduling arrangement, and how many kids can we safely, we're going to look at how many kids can we safely get on a bus and those kinds of things. There probably will be some added costs.
Julie, did you have another question as well?
So is there a possibility that some of our scenarios require us to provide masks for students? Just curious.
To
Like
provide
ride the bus or be in the building?
to provide, we have to still talk about what that would look like in terms of students wearing masks in the building or on the buses. In part because we do have students who would not be able to wear a mask. In part because we've talked about with our youngest learners, the fact that they have trouble keeping the mask on. And what does that mean when they're taking it off and dropping it, and how does that affect hygiene as well? So I know that's not your question, but I offer that because it's a little more complicated than are we going to be obligated to provide masks? I think we could require them and request that people wear, have their own cloth mask, and then have others that we may need to have on hand. There are different ways that we could go about that, but we're still working through those scenarios.
So I apologize. I know they're both really hard questions. I was just curious how you were thinking about both of them. So thank you.
Yep.
Other questions on COVID-19? Stacy, go ahead.
Very turned around on my camera. I just have a question on, so I had asked about if we're at school, if it is the distance learning, and I know you're doing surveys, and I know that you've had a lot of feedback. So I'm wondering, what is the timeline to help teachers prepare for what the new scenario will look like? Because it sounds like we'll definitely improve upon what the spring looked like. And will teachers have professional development with that, or what kind of, and when does that happen, given, especially if we don't know until the end of July? What's the time frame?
Well, we did start the conversation this spring about what staff needed if we're in a distance learning scenario again in the fall. And we talked about the technology skills that they would need. We talked about engagement with students, and in particular, a big part of our conversation around distance learning is access and equitable opportunities for students. But the other part of this needs to be equitable engagement as well. So what does it look like so that all students can engage in the learning regardless of what they need? So I talked to you about this before too, with our building blocks for student success, and the fact that in an in-person environment, students may have seemed to have certain skills figured out in terms of how they organized and how they knew how to access information or ask for help. But in a distance learning environment, those were off kilter, right? And so we reflected on that too. What is it that we saw that students needed support with, and what was our evidence that they needed that support as well, so that we could start building some of what we needed to do as teachers or as educators to front load our situation so that students did have equitable access, opportunity, and engagement. And so I mention all that because it's not that once we know at the end of July, suddenly everyone's going to just start thinking about it. Everyone has started thinking about it. We have curriculum money set aside for a lot of our training. We're doing quite a bit of opportunities for staff this summer. That said, we've also been trying to encourage staff to take kind of a brain break briefly before they start up again, because it was a pretty intense spring for a lot of people. And so we know that a little bit of downtime is important for some mental health as well. So that said, our staff survey also goes out, and our staff survey is going to start with just our public health needs, and then we're going to be continuing our work on what do you need instructionally. So it continues throughout the summer.
Okay, and then a couple of other things. Just 2 points. One thing I thought of is just, I'm sure somebody else has thought of this too, but we need to also be mindful of, if it is distant learning at the beginning, it's also a lot different in the sense that the students and teachers won't already know each other. So that's just one more hurdle, given, spring, we at least had 3/4 of the year, school year,
Right.
for them to know their teacher. So I don't know if there's something different you do with that. And the other thing I wanted to point out is for higher education, with distance learning, there's this term regular and substantive interaction is required between student and faculty. And so I think that's probably a best practices thing we could look at and use that as a measure. So those are points I wanted to also leave you with.
No, and I appreciate that. That is very clear that that's going to be part of our plan, because we did see that from our surveys that we needed more face-to-face. And I keep calling it equitable engagement because we do want to really talk about engaging with students beyond just being in the same Google Meet with them. It has to go beyond that. It's how does true engagement look, so that we know what's the evidence that students are engaging in the work. So, and that's kind of your substantive, I think.
Yes, it's regular and substantive is what they found has worked. So I'm sorry, just to follow up. So there's still training to be had probably in August, it sounds like.
Well, some are doing some now. There's some work already started.
Okay.
But we certainly in August will go, that's typically when we go full force, you know, with a lot of the professional learning is typically in August, but there's work going on. There's work going on currently as well. Mhm. Mhm.
Thank you for all the really great questions. Are there any other questions on COVID-19? Thank you, Barb, for these regular updates. And thank you for listening so carefully to our community. I know you're getting a lot of feedback as we are through email, and we appreciate that feedback. It helps make us better. So thank you so much for your work there. That was the last information discussion item. We're on to item 9A, which is approval of donations and grants totaling $33,132.19. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the donations and grants.
So moved.
So moved, was that with Kevin?
Second.
Or was that Mike who moved? I'm sorry.
It was Kevin.
Kevin.
Thank you. Moved by Kevin, second by Julie. Any discussion on the grants and donations? I want to thank our community members and companies that have made these grants and donations to the district. We're greatly appreciative of them. We'll use these funds to further the mission of the school district and will be used towards the wishes of the donors. Thank you so much. If we get a roll call vote, Julie, for the acceptance of these grants and donations.
Mike Chevalier,
Aye.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz,
Aye.
Stacy Stout,
I
and Lucy Payne.
The chair's aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Julie. Next item on the agenda, 9B, approval of policy 713, student activity accounting. Barb, if you could address this, please.
Sure. This is our third reading of this policy, and Jeff is here and he can answer any questions that you have. But at this point, I haven't heard anything since the second reading to indicate that you do have any questions or changes. So I'm asking for you to approve policy 713 as presented.
Thank you. I'm looking
So
for a
moved.
That was Mike.
Yep.
moved by Mike Chevalier.
Is Judy seconding?
Second.
Thank
I'm
you.
second.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion and second to approve policy 713. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please, Julie.
Mike Chevalier,
Aye.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz,
Aye.
Stacy Stout,
I
Lucy Payne.
Chair's aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Julie. Next on the agenda is item 9C, approval of the 2020-2021 Mahtomedi Public School Student and Family Handbook. Barb, you want to speak to this?
Sure. We discussed this at the study session, at our last study session. This handbook is intended to be, we work to make this a district-wide handbook so it's consistent throughout the district with some specifics by building. It is electronic, and the purpose of it being electronic is that as we make updates and there are changes, that we can make those in the moment and then also communicate those out to students and families as we make those changes. So what you see in front of you is what we're asking you to approve as the start of the year, and then again as things may change, because I know we do our policy work mid-year. We may have updates to that handbook, at which time we will make those changes and communicate those out. So,
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the handbook, please?
Move approval, Judy.
Thank you, Judy, for the motion.
Second.
Second by Mike. Any discussion on the handbooks? Kevin and then Julie and then Stacy. Go ahead, Kevin.
When we've talked quite a bit about the handbook, and one of the things that I would like to see us look at thoughtfully and expeditiously is an enhancement of the a handbook that would include some of the equity, inclusion, racial justice that we've talked about, and we're going to talk a lot more about here in the next month or so. In our handbook right now, we have the Mahtomedi Public Schools non-discrimination policy. Little paragraph. It looks like for me it's on page 15. No, page 2. Excuse me. And that could just be my iPhone. I don't know if that's for sure yet, but it's right in the beginning of the student handbook. And I think that in light of where we're at, what we've heard, I would like us to consider augmenting, enhancing this handbook as we're ready to do that, again, as quickly as we can. We do have board policies to address some of these issues, but despite the work the school board has done and administration has done and the policy work that does address some of this, it's clear from some of our communications and from our public comment tonight that we need to do more. And I think the student handbook would be an excellent way to get that out, because I don't know how many people go and look at school board policies as a rule. And so the handbook does go out to every student. It'll be a great way to get the word out that some of the behaviors that we know happen are not at all welcome or permissible.
So Kevin, you're looking for us to do that work in the future, but to go ahead and keep moving this forward tonight.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that. Thank you. I agree with those comments. Those are very important. Julie and then Stacy.
Okay, so a question that I brought up while we were discussing this in the study session was, just to clarify, we are approving a live document, or we are approving this document and then changes will come back on consent agenda. So I'm just trying to help everyone understand what exactly we're approving.
Sure, thanks. So as a school board, you are approving a handbook because it's to say, we've seen this and this, we're approving what we see here in this handbook. There may be changes that would require, so Kevin has talked about a policy level change. Policy level change goes through a process that is more than consent agenda, right? We have our 3 readings, 2 or 3 readings. And so something like that might not just go through a consent agenda if it's a more substantive change. If it's something that is not, then we might just go through the consent agenda. But an example, like Kevin has mentioned, would be more of a discussion and would be through an actual action item, I would suggest.
Okay. All right, thank you for clarifying that, and thank you for all of the great work in editing and making things more consistent. I really appreciate all the effort. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Stacy?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate Julie's question as well. And I also want to echo that I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I do want to just point out one thing that I mentioned last time as well. It does urge families to make every effort to not schedule anything outside of us, or to schedule everything outside of school hours. And it's repeated 5 paragraphs later, and then it's repeated again and again. So it's a little overkill. And so while I think it's very important to send that message, I just think, given the fact that there's a lot outside of people's control, I just feel like we don't probably need to state it multiple times like that.
And I appreciate that. I think it's stated in a number of different sections, isn't it? And so
the one I'm looking at, it's in the same section, just 5 paragraphs apart. But
okay.
I just want to point out, because of our earlier discussions about, it's important that every voice is included in our school calendar as a community calendar. And so especially if we're encouraging people to schedule their appointments and vacations around it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Stacy. Any other discussion on the handbooks? I know these are a very big project. Thank the administrators for all their time to make them happen and change and update and make them better every year. So it is a big lift on top of the other work that you're doing right now, and I appreciate the timeliness with it was done. So with that, Julie, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Mike Chevalier,
Aye.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz,
Aye.
Stacy Stout,
Aye.
and Lucy Payne.
The chair is aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is item 9D, approval of the long-term facilities maintenance or the LTFM 10-year plan. And this has Jeff's name on it. Jeff?
Okay, and yeah, this is ours, not 916 is the next item. Yeah, we're just asking the board to approve the 10-year plan. So even though you're approving a 10-year plan and you did it last year, it comes to the board on an annual basis. So approving the resolution just ensures our participation in the state's program. I think it was in the cover memo, but should be pointed out that this will be for, the plan you're approving is for 21-22. So approving this plan gets it on our levy for this fall, and the funding will be for the 21-22 school year. So we did cover, I think at the finance facilities meeting earlier this month, we went into the different projects in detail. So again, just ask you to approve the plan, and then subsequently we send that to MDE for the commissioner's approval.
Okay. Thank you. I'm looking for a motion to approve the LTFM 10-year plan.
Move approval, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Second.
Second by Julie. So moved by Kevin, second by Julie to approve the LTFM 10-year plan. Any discussion or questions for Jeff? I know our committee structure works really well, so I think many of the questions were probably addressed and asked at that meeting. I'm not on that committee, so I thank my board members who take that work so seriously to make sure we have the right plans in place. So with that, Julie, if we could do a roll call vote, please.
Yes, Mike Chevalier,
Aye.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz,
Aye.
Stacy Stout,
Aye.
and Lucy Payne.
The chair is aye. Motion carries. So next on the agenda, we have item 9E, approval of the Northeast Metro 916 Intermediate School District's long-term facilities maintenance budget. So Jeff, if this is yours also.
Yep, okay. Yeah, I guess along the same lines, this is for the intermediate district's participation in the program. So each member district passes a resolution to ensure their participation in the program. I think that we don't spend time looking at their projects. I think in the cover memo, I got an estimate of the cost. Or our share, it's about $6,100, which will appear on our levy this fall. So again, this is something that's done on an annual basis, their 10-year plan, but is brought to each member board on an annual basis. So just ask you to approve the resolution.
Thank you. Looking for a motion.
So moved, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Motion.
Second, Kevin.
Thank you. Moved by Mike Chevalier, second by Kevin Donovan. Any discussion or questions for Jeff on this? Kevin?
It's more of a statement than a question. Since I serve on the 916 board, I can give a little, you may have noticed when you looked at that, the numbers there, that in the beginning of the 10-year plan, the costs are quite, well, comparatively quite low. But as the timeline goes out, there are some higher ones as you get further out. And the reason for this is that so many of the facilities at 916 are relatively brand new. And as we know in our own homes, if you have a brand new house, it goes pretty well for a while, and then you start having to have maintenance done. And then all of a sudden you have to put a roof on and you go, oh my gosh. So that's kind of what we're looking at is the newer facilities right now keep those numbers relatively low. And then as things age, you'll see the increases.
Thank you, Kevin, for that background. Any other discussion? Julie, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Yes, Mike Chevalier,
Aye.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz,
Aye.
Stacy Stout,
Aye.
Lucy Payne.
The chair is aye. That motion carries. The last item in this section, 9F, approval of the 2020-2021 preliminary budget. Jeff, so glad you're with us tonight.
Let me see if I can share the screen here. I've got a PowerPoint.
And the PowerPoint's also in the packet.
There we go.
Great.
Can we see it? All right. Good. So we're asking the board to approve the preliminary budget. In this district, we've got to do this prior to the start of the fiscal year. And it's using the assumptions we have in place, both on the revenue and expenditure side. And then we generally come back, in this district, we'll come back at probably halfway through the fiscal year, December, January kind of time frame, and do a revised budget. Are you seeing the entire screen there?
We are.
Well, I'm not, but that's okay. All right. So this shot here gives us a look at all of the different funds. And I kind of laid this out by kind of the way the audit report will show these different funds. So we have our governmental funds. They're probably the funds you're most familiar with: the general fund, food service, community ed, debt service, and then total revenues and expenditures for those funds, our internal service, our health insurance fund, and then our OPEB trust for total of all funds. And I just go back and comment, I think we probably have had maybe 2 learning sessions where we've kind of discussed some of the, we've discussed the budget numbers, the assumptions that are built in. And then we did present this to the finance committee earlier in the month. So general fund, we're projecting a surplus. I'll just comment, and I think I've got as the kind of the last page here, we'll look at our last PowerPoint slide, we'll look at the current year. But when we look at that estimated beginning fund balance, that's just kind of using our current revised budget. And as we are working our way through we've done a lot of preliminary work on the audit. I think that that fund balance will probably be a little bit better, at least in the general fund. And then I'd also comment on the internal service. It was during the audit last year that the district decided to recognize all of the liability that's out there for all everybody who's participated in the plan. That fund that used to carry a positive fund balance, but when we decide, as the correct way to do it, to recognize all of that liability, the fund went into a deficit, and I think what we talked about with the finance group, we're just going to have to look at that and fund a portion of that on an annual basis until we get that back to a balanced situation. And then I think also in your packet is you've got the budget book. And in the front of that book, we go through the different assumptions, a lot of detail, I think, as it relates to the general fund, maybe not so much with some of the other non-major funds. But for building that revenue budget, we are looking at and this for 2021, that basic formula amount 65, 67, that's in law. It's a 2% increase. And that's an important number for us because taking that number times our enrollment provides it provides 56% of our total general fund revenue. Other assumptions, thought we had enrollment there, but so other assumptions, other components of general education aid, and when I say formula driven, that again means that they're tied to their dollar amounts tied to our enrollment. The property tax levy is included, and that's the amount that the board certified last December, and other state categorical aid. The most significant piece there would be special education. That's projected to be, of that 6.1 million, about $4.5 million. And then we've got our federal revenue, so our various special education programs and our title programs. Enrollment, I show both the kind of the ADM is the students, and then there's a weighting factor that calculates to a weighted average daily membership. And it's that weighted average daily membership that we get that provides our funding. So if we go back to that 3631 calculated total WATMs times our basic foundation aid, that's that 56% of total revenue. On the expenditure side, for the most part, we're just rolling forward the staff that's in place during the current year. And if we look at staff personnel costs, so salaries and benefits, that represents 77% of general fund expenditures. Then we look at fund balance. And I think, Kevin, you asked me at the finance committee meeting when I put the target in there. So I did that. If we look at FY20, so we look at the various components of fund balance. We have a restricted component, an assigned, non-spendable, the unassigned, and then I'm showing the target. And the target represents 8% of our total annual expenditures within the general fund. So we're not at that target, but I think I'd point out from FY19 that unassigned. So when we're talking about the target, it's getting that unassigned fund balance to that level. So in FY19, year June 30 last year, $1.6 million, almost 1.7. Target's 3.2. So we're growing that unassigned fund balance up to 2.1 at the end of this year. Again, short of the target, but projecting a surplus for next year as well. So we kind of move towards that target. I just wanted to end with this, put this slide in here. You've seen this as I've given reports throughout the spring, but it's looking at our current year revised budget, revenue and expense. I'm pulling out, eventually I got to get Fund 25 and Fund 50 in there. So we've done the changes to enable that. But for purposes here, I pulled it out. But you can see that on the revised budget, revenue over expenditures, we're projecting a surplus of $437,000. And as we have been working through our preliminary audit, things we're going to do a little bit better than that. So I think we'll see. So again, that'll be an increase to that unassigned fund balance that'll roll into the next year. So, and I would say that, and the surplus that's in place for next year, for the most part, will go to the unassigned fund balance as well. So we'll continue to work towards that 8% target. So questions? And again, I've attached the, in your packet, you've got the preliminary budget book. In there are the kind of detailed assumptions for the general fund. And we'll probably, I would say with the the way we're working through the audit, probably by the end of July, we can come back with some pretty good numbers for the current year. Not final, but pretty close.
Thank you, Jeff. Before with discussion, if we could get a motion to approve the preliminary budget, please.
So moved, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Second, Judy.
Thank you. Moved by Mike Chevalier, seconded by Judy Schwartz. Any discussion or questions on the budget? As Jeff, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stacy.
Hi, thank you, Jeff, for that.
Yeah.
I have a question. That second to last chart, I'm just looking it up. Okay, so general funds, parentheses, fund balance. So you have the unassigned, and then you have the target, which I guess is the target for the unassigned.
Right. Yep.
So, so where are we at with the percentages, given that we're headed toward 8%?
I think we're probably at about 5 point. I think our projection was for about 5.5 at the end of this. So you're talking about what percent are we at compared to that 8%? I think it's about 5. Yeah, I probably should have that on that slide as well. But I would say about 5.5%. And
Okay.
again, I would say just the things we're seeing as we work through the audit, we're gonna, I don't want to say far exceed that surplus that we're projecting, but we know we're gonna do better. So.
Okay. Okay. Yes, the percentage is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Kevin, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Jeff. Your charts do have help us through what's a complicated. School funding is one of the most complicated things to do out there. So thank you for the work. You know, I think that, you know, we're again, what we're seeing now and what you're proposing makes a lot of sense. I would urge some caution on what the state will be able to give in the next biennium. And the 2% piece, you know, we may have to look at a 1 or a 1.5, I hope, based on what we're seeing as a state with all of the stresses on the financial system that we do have. And you've added yet one more worry for me at night is the cost of busing and what that might look like. So thanks for giving me one more reason to take a
Sure.
sleeping pill. But I really appreciate your work. And but I think we're going to, and that's what we heard from the committee. And to be clear for everyone, there is a nice committee of school board members, administrators, the finance guy, and community members who have expertise in various financial professions. And so that helps kind of balance it out. So I think we're on, you know, we got really good direction, but I just think I'd make sure that we're, and that's why that fund balance thing is important, that percentage, to try to, as best we can, steer that back to where the policy dictates, so that in case we do have, hopefully we won't, but in case we do have some needs, we'll be able to weather the storm.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
Other questions or comments on the budget?
I just want to echo thank you to Jeff for doing such a great job for us, making it easier for us to understand. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks.
All right. Julie, if you could do a roll call vote for the motion to approve the 2020-2021 preliminary budget, please.
Okay, Mike Chevalier,
Aye.
Kevin Donovan,
Aye.
Julie McGraw, aye. Judy Schwartz,
Aye.
Stacy Stout,
Hi.
and Lucy Payne.
The chair is aye. Motion carries. That's our last action item. Next, we have committee reports from school board members. So we'll start with the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, AMSD Board. Mike, do you have a report?
Not really. There's nothing going on till August 14th now. And I think you guys might have been sent out some stuff from Scott Kroonquist about what's been going on with the legislature and things. So that's what I have for a report.
Maybe, does anyone want to speak to, we did have an AMSD meet. Oh, that's what Julie's raising her hand.
No, you can go ahead. You can
Nope.
share. I was like, we just had a 3-hour Zoom meeting, so we did have a whole lot going on last week. So
Yeah, no,
Oh,
there are a few of you that were in attendance, and I think it was a really good board conference hosted by AMSD, and so I don't know if there's anyone who wanted to speak. I did get called away for and something related to our fall planning, and so I missed a little bit of it, but I know that the parts I was there for were really very, very thought-provoking and very helpful in terms of resources and connecting with other districts throughout the metro area. So I don't know if anyone had specifics they wanted to share.
Julie, do you want to share, or Kevin?
sure, I can share, and then Kevin can share as well. It was the Reimagine Minnesota conference with AMSD last week, and I just echo what Barb said, how informative and important the sharing of equity information was between huge groups of people. Really talking about equity in terms of the big holes in the distance learning, and talking about how we can't go back to things as normal. We need to go back to things being better. Just really great sharing of resources, information, and ideas for change. And I know there's lots of notes that I took that I would plan to share at our retreat when we really start diving into specific details. So.
Kevin, do you want to add something? I can add at the end. I attended as
Sure.
well.
So just again, for anybody that's out there, the Reimagine Minnesota is an initiative that's been going on for 3 or 4 years. I'm not quite sure, but a number of years. And when it originally came together, again, it was known that Minnesota has one of the largest opportunity achievement gaps. And what are we going to do about it? What are schools? How are we going to tackle this very complex issue? And how are we going to make meaningful change? And so I don't know how many districts came together on that work, but I know we did a session in Maplewood for our kind of region. This again 3 or 4 years ago, where we had students and administrators, teachers, school board people, all getting together, and we got split up. So we were working with people that might be from Brooklyn Center or Burnsville, we were all split up. And so some really meaningful stuff came out of that original thing. And then it's been worked on for the years subsequent. And it is, of course, as we know, still work to be done. And so this is AMSD, thankfully AMSD and MSBA have really taken leadership roles on making sure this continues. And this 3-hour conference was very good. Again, we got, because of the Zoom and distance piece, it was kind of cool where you're in the big group, and then all of a sudden you get zoomed out to these little subgroups, and you don't know who you're gonna to get in with, and it's really a lot of fun. I made a couple new connections on LinkedIn with some of my small group, and then all of a sudden they extract you. They say, all right, 2 minutes left, and boom, you're out. But a really good conference, really very worthwhile. 3 hours, I thought.
I agree with all the comments Julie and Kevin have shared. I think it was during this meeting I was texting Barb at the same time saying, look, I see all these alignment pieces to our strategic plan. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of the same concepts and ideas that we've talked about in terms of making some systemic changes within our district through that strategic plan that they also discussed. I think there's more that we can do as well, but some of the things that were helpful to me is, they were talking about tearing down the system while we're building a new system. Which is very true. And then in one of the panels, and I forget which school, it was during the school board panel, a series of questions that would help us think about a number of things were, as you think about policies and different things, think about who does it help, who does it hurt, and who is left behind. And so that's just a nice frame of 3 questions for us to use as we continue to do our work. But there are a lot of other really good things, as Julie said. Hopefully we'll dive into this when we're able to have that retreat and look more at this work more in depth at that time. So I was super pleased that so many of us could attend. Again, like Kevin said, great connections with other people across the metro area doing the same work in a little bit different spaces, different districts, but doing the same work and having those groups come together. So Barb, did you want to add something from that day?
No, I think you all, no, I don't need to reiterate the things that you've said. So thanks.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
All right. Next on the list is MAIF. Julie.
Okay, the MAIF board met on Monday, and it was a very brief meeting, but just to reiterate from our last meeting, this meeting was Abby Moffett and Dixon Two's last meeting. So if you see either of them in the community, make sure you thank them for all of their work and all of their efforts that have made a huge difference in the lives of Mahtomedi students. And then I also just wanted to share that the MAIF board is forming a DEI committee being led by Mithra Romali. And DEI is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Group. So MAIF is also taking steps to make the MAIF board more equitable. So if anyone had any questions, otherwise that's it.
Kevin, go ahead.
Just a comment. Mithra is really excellent. I think I can't think of a better person to lead that committee for MAIF. And she has she does national work in this area, primarily out on the eastern seaboard, but she's very, very strong. Great asset.
Yes, we're lucky.
All right, next in the list for reports is the MSBA, the Minnesota School Boards Association. Not much to report. We are going to have a special meeting in July because the Minnesota State High School League has asked to come speak to the board. They're very concerned about athletics in our state with the current COVID situation, and they have struggled financially, and so it's an opportunity to talk to us about what's happening there. So in August, I'll have more to share at that point. Northeast Metro 916 board, Kevin?
Yeah, we, our last meeting we had was a board retreat. It was 2 hours. It was actually on the same day as the Reimagine Minnesota. So I had 3 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon, late evening or early evening. And our board retreat, as it was last year, was working on equity and inclusion. And we had Robin DeAngelo, she wasn't with us because we were doing it remotely, but we watched a video that she did. And then the board has her book, White Fragility, coming. Apparently it's hard to get a hold of right now, but they placed the order early. And so at some point I'll have a copy. If you haven't read it, I'm happy to borrow when I'm done, but it was a great 2 hour session. And they reiterate how 916 is there to be a resource to member districts in this area.
Thank you. I lost my agenda. Hold on. My iPad switched on me.
I think subcommittee reports are next, Lucy.
Thank you. Subcommittee reports. Do we have any committees that met? I don't think we have.
Well, we had finance and facilities, but we've really discussed everything, so.
Okay. Any other items to report from board members? Okay. we're down to item 11, superintendent's report. Barb.
Thank you. So a few things. One, the district did earn the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting again for transparency in reporting with regard to our audit from 2019. So congratulations to all of our staff that worked on that audit and the financial report, and in particular submitting all the documents and paperwork to be able to show that transparency in financial reporting. I do have a couple things on behalf of the MAPS team. I do want to share that the MAPS team is spending the summer fundraising, and then we'll start a 12-month research project on a protein structure to present at the annual experimental biology conference in the spring. And to attend this conference, the students in MAPS must raise about $1,000 each to cover expenses such as travel, food, and hotel costs. So members are applying for grants, taking donations, and providing manual labor such as yard projects. So if you do have yard work projects that you'd want the MAPS team to perform, please contact the MAPS advisor, Mr. Jim Lane. Or if you would like to make a general donation, you could also contact him about that, making the checks out to the Mahtomedi MAPS team, if you would like. I do know that I was told, I remember last time they did some work removing buckthorn, and so I will mention that they have skills in that area. So also I want to thank our SLC, our Student Leadership Council from the high school, who did a food and home goods drive recently to drop off, let's see, they had a trailer, 2 cars, 3 trucks, and a trailer full of food and home goods to drop off at A Mother's Love, which is an organization based in Minneapolis who works to distribute donations. They will be distributing donations across the Twin Cities. So congratulations for their work. They went about this drive, you know, during the summer when a lot of word of mouth. I do know I saw a lot of flyers around the neighborhood as well. So they worked hard to do that. So thank you to the SLC. I also would like to thank all the students, families, alumni who have reached out to us recently regarding our equity and anti-racism work. What really struck me is how many people acknowledged both what a good education they got in Mahtomedi of the alumni and how much work we still need to do as well. And so I appreciate that as we are talking about our strategic plan and really looking at what success means beyond test scores, and we've said that a lot of times before, that test scores are one measure, and what other measures are there of young adult success. So how are we preparing our kids for young adult success? I appreciate that that we have so many alumni coming back to tell us what that should look like, and having that perspective of having been here and knowing as they go on what else we can do. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate, we've talked a lot about recently what we're doing as adults to do better to actively cultivate that equitable, inclusive, bias-free environment in our schools. And I've talked to some current students recently who said, that's great, you talk about it, but we need to see it, we need to feel it, we need to be involved, we need our voice to be part of that. And so I would want, us talking about it is something they feel like they want to see it. They want to see it, they want to feel it, they want to be part of it. And so I just would want you to know that that is something that is important to us. We've talked about that from the beginning, that student voice is so important in the work of our strategic plan. And so we'll be continuing to have those conversations with students to make it so that they do see and feel a change as we go forward, and they can be involved in making that change as well, because obviously that's what we want for our kids. Just I'll mention the agency once more, that having agency means that they are going to be part of driving that future and driving our success towards that more equitable environment that we all want. So thank you again to our community, to our students, to our alumni who have come out to talk to us about what they want to see for our district. It's important that we hear from everyone, and all the voices are just showing how much community support there is, because everyone wants us to do better, and they want to be a part of that change. So that's fabulous. That's commitment, and so I appreciate that. And with that, I think that's my report. So thank you.
Thank you. That was our last agenda item. Have a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved, Kevin?
Thank you, Kevin.
And
Moved by Kevin, second by Stacy. We actually don't need to vote on this one, so we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
thank you.
Have a good night.